athletes should just stick to sport. Discuss.
We've seen a number of issues in Australia over the summer where athletes have been asked to, stick to sport and not get involved in political or social issues. But I think the important thing is that athletes aren't just athletes. They're not just robots. They're people too. They have one vote, just like the guy that works at the fish and chip shop or the cab driver or whatever. So they have thoughts and feelings and belief about particular issues, and if there's a way that they think that they can impact them for the better, then I think that's an important thing that they should do, and probably a growing part of their role as athletes and influencers in society.
Yeah, definitely. It is an interesting topic because I feel like even in different teams that I've been in, people have different opinions on how much they want to put in and be part of a conversation, and you definitely respect the side where some people just want to play and, that's what they're comfortable doing. But I agree with what you said. I think, before you take the field, you are a person and you're human, and, you've got to be true to that as well. And I think there's been some terrific examples throughout the summer with people really standing up for what they believe in. You look at someone like Dan Christian who took a really powerful stance during Big Bash. It's just, I think you've got a responsibility with social issues to make sure that you're bringing injustices to light. And we do have an incredible opportunity with our platform. And I think a responsibility as well, where we're part of the community too. And if we see something that isn't quite right, we've definitely got a responsibility to try and do something about it.
Agreed. Is that me? Yep. When did you realise that racism was an issue for a lot of Australians? What impact did it have on you?
Yeah, I feel like you get little flashes of it, or I certainly did throughout my life and childhood. Yep. But probably the big thing for me was I didn't experience it directly as a white Australian. Yep. So perhaps, I was a bit naive to just how hurtful some of those comments were, and perhaps how alienated some people felt too.
As a kid, off-the-cuff statements, things that were probably a lot more acceptable 20 and 30 years ago than what they are today, makes you think that those things are okay when you're a kid, or that it's part of, the fabric of what you do, or your social structure or whatever. So I think as a kid, you're pretty open-minded to just taking it all in. And then the only time it sort of started to feel a bit odd was in high school. My best friends now, they're still my best friends, but they would, rip on me for being an Aboriginal kid. And I didn't really take any offence to it for the fact that I was being Aboriginal. I am. But it was more the fact that was what made me different to everyone else. So, we would rip on someone else for another reason, and for multiple friends, but for me it was the thing that was different about me was that I was Aboriginal, and that sort of made me feel a bit odd. And then it was only sort of as I finished high school and got a little bit older that it started to realise that this was actually quite destructive and very hateful, and to the point I think you said, you get to a point where you realise that the things that other people would say to you, or that you would hear people say, you actually wouldn't feel comfortable saying yourself. And that's, I think, the moment that the penny drops and you realise, okay, if I'm not comfortable saying it, but I've heard it my whole life, I'm sort of caught at this crossroads a little bit, where going forward, I guess I'm not really, comfortable being around people that are like that. So, certainly a slightly different experience with racism to you, but with a largely white Anglo-Saxon upbringing, I think we have a lot of similarities as well. So.
I have one other question.
Yeah.
Yeah, your mates, have you ever brought it up with them, or you still talk to them and stuff like that? Or
no, not really. I don't think so. We're a bit older now, and they're probably a bit older and a bit mature now. So it's certainly not. And I also don't see them as often anymore because we're all a bit older and got kids. But no, I've never sort of sat them down and said, this is how you used to make me feel, and prefer if you didn't do it. Probably something I should have done, to be honest. But I've never had that conversation with them. Again, probably because I didn't categorise it as a big issue with them. Unfortunately, it made me feel bad, and I never really, consciously put it back on them. So, yeah.
How can sport create an inclusive environment that are free from issues like racism?
Outside of government, sports, are probably the next biggest influencer within Australian culture. Not only do they have huge numbers of participants and fans, but there's also, the passion involved. So if you see a player or an athlete talking about that you love, talking about issues of racism and, how they can best, eradicate racism in Australia, then I think there's an opportunity for those fans to really listen and make a difference, hopefully, in their behaviour moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like there's a couple of sides to it, like the symbolism. So what you visually see at events when we have, Indigenous rounds and those sorts of things where you're celebrating culture. I think that's really powerful for people to be able to, see those things, but it's only one side of it. The other is the behaviour and making sure that you're creating environments that are inclusive and have that element of equality, because that's ultimately what you want. You want your sport to be a place where everyone feels welcome and valued. Yeah. And I agree. I think it's, it's not just the athletes, it's also in administration too, and making sure we're bringing the right people into the conversations and not just sort of going, yep, this is what we need and doing it. Having people involved in the conversations who actually, have a really good understanding of what it is we're trying to achieve and how we can get better as a sport, as individuals too. There's heaps of layers to it. But it definitely feels like it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach. There's got to be quite open to different ideas and different ways of rolling it out too.
And definitely, different sports are going to have different fan bases and different, ethnic groups that are associated with their sport. So I think will be very individualised between sports. But I think the thing that you touched on then, being a sports administrator myself, is we agree, let's solve this issue. We know the right thing to do, and they'll go act, which is really great. But the consultation with experts is so important to get it right the first time. And it's something that I think sports administrators, from what I've seen, can miss that vital step sometimes. And we've seen some really positive versions of that recently with Rugby Australia before, the national anthem actions or piece that took place. There was a huge amount of consultation between the right people, and I think that's why that's a particular example of with everyone that hit home so hard, because it was done the right way and all the right people were consulted first. So me?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. Racism is not just restricted to skin colour. Discuss.
Well, it's not, right? Because I think, perhaps difference in people isn't always visual. Who you are is not always perhaps what you can see in someone. So identity means different things to different people. Your culture, your heritage, all those sorts of things can be really different. And I think particularly in a society like Australia, which is so multicultural, it's not always visual, and I think that's probably the mistake some people make coming into environments saying, we don't have anyone of an ethnic background in this team. We're all just sort of white Australians here. I think that's a bit of a misstep. From my experience and all the teams I've been involved in, sometimes it's about actually engaging with your teammates and learning a little bit about them and who they are and what their background is, and it can actually be really powerful in terms of storytelling, getting to know, how people see themselves and what's important to them. And that's something that we tried to introduce at the Sydney Thunder, which is a team that I'm part of. And, we learned a lot about our teammates, but two in particular, Annika Learoyd and Hannah Darlington, shared their stories as Aboriginal women, and it was so powerful in terms of their background and upbringing and sharing, I guess, their family history. And for them as well, it's something that they learnt a little bit later on in their life. So I think that's probably the other misconception as well, is people just knowing exactly who they are and where they've come from. So that was really powerful for our team, and it was really generous as well of them to share a bit of who they are.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think what I touched on earlier is although I may not look like what people perceive an Aboriginal person to look like, the friends that I was with in high school were still able to joke around about having an Indigenous friend, and although like I said, wasn't much of an issue outside of that particular environment, doesn't mean that that stuff's not hurtful just because I don't have the darker skin or whatever it is. And like you said, you can't judge a book by its cover. So, and I think this concept that it is just about skin colour just means that talking about, it's like, it's okay when there's lots of white people around, but then we have to behave differently if there's people of colour around. Like, that whole concept itself is really, really backwards. So I'd much prefer the idea of just, like you said, speaking to people and finding out a bit more about them.
Yeah, definitely. Was there ever a time you witnessed racism and chose not to act? Why?
Yeah. I didn't have the education, I guess, to have a more in-depth conversation with them about it. So that's something that I've certainly tried to work on over the last 12 to 18 months as I've become more comfortable in my position, is like, okay, if I say no, or we can't talk about this, these are the 3 reasons why, and this is how you can be a better person next time. This is what the difference is. This might have been something that you've grown up with, but it's not cool now. I'm not cool being around it. So I guess the reason why I wasn't so active in that instance is having not, fully understood the whole thing that we're dealing with here. And I think that's, pretty common. I might be speaking out of turn, but I reckon that's pretty common in most of society. I think people would hear racist remarks now and realise that they're not quite right, but maybe not be super comfortable in taking a position because they don't quite feel educated to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah. Certainly as a young teenager, when you just want to fit in, sometimes it's hard to stand up and say it's not right. But yeah, definitely now I'd feel a lot more comfortable doing it. If you were going to call out a friend or teammate for a racist comment, how would you do it?
Yeah, I think this ties into the other question that we just had, but it's something I'm certainly a lot more comfortable talking about now, or having that conversation with a friend or a teammate now, because I think I'm more educated in it. So now it'd be probably not publicly. That's not something that I'm super comfortable doing, is being, or putting anyone else down publicly for their own comments or thoughts. But I'd certainly pull them aside after training or later, if we're out with some friends, I might send them a text or give them a call and be like, just wanted to touch on this particular thing you said or did, and then go about having a conversation with them in private. And now I'm a lot more comfortable with having that conversation. So that's probably the way that I would do it. I've seen some other people in the past knock it on the head there and there. Dan Christian is one that, knowing him pretty well, that he would knock it on the head there and there. But there's something in me that there's like an education component that I think is really, really important. So rather than just slapping someone on the hand publicly, that might stop them from doing it again, let's have a conversation in private about what you said, why you said it. And often that is a really interesting conversation to have with someone as well. Why do you think that's cool to do, or where does it come from? And then, here's a bit of an idea as to why I think the way that I think. You may like it, you may not like it, but it's something for you to take in anyway. And maybe before you think about doing or saying that thing again, that you give us a call or have a chat to me.
I think too, just letting them know that, I don't know everything about racism or every issue or anything like that, but certainly in what I have read and my understanding at the moment, I'd encourage them to go away and learn more too. Because ultimately that's what I want to be part of. I want to be part of environments that are inclusive, where people feel equal. They feel like they belong. I think that's the most powerful thing, is creating a sense of belonging and an environment where, you know, people wake up each morning and they want to be there. You know, they want to get to training as quick as they can and have a good time with their mates, not walk into a room and feel as though, am I going to fit in today, or is someone going to chip me for something that I have absolutely no control over.